Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's CX Quick Tip. Of course, this is going to be a great conversation because I have Roy Atkinson on today on the CX Quick Tips. Roy, welcome.
Always a pleasure to be here, sir.
And I'll tell you, it always is for me as well, because that means we're going to have, I guess you'd say, an energizing and excitable conversation. We have had several CX Quick Tips throughout the year, and we only last 10 minutes. So, we really get to it. And we're going to do that in just 1 second. And we've kind of talked to the change of the seasons. Well, now we're towards the end of the year. We're sitting here. It's December 7th. And we're doing this CX Quick Tip, really thinking about the permanency of 2022. You and I have talked about that a little bit. So if you start talking about keywords to focus in on for CX leaders for 2022, what are your thoughts on that?
I think my magic word for 2022 is uncertainty. There's just so much stuff going on right now. We'd love to say the pandemic is behind us, but as we know, shifting sands still. And also what's going on with the Great Resignation? How do we resolve the issues that are being brought up by that? What are employees saying about the future? How do we address their concerns? How do we make sure that we retain them? All of that. So uncertainty is huge. And I think that we need to pay attention to that with regard to both internal and external concerns, right? Because our customers are going through the same things we are. They're not certain about their futures. They're not certain about what their employment status is going to be. They may be shifting from being employed by somebody to starting their own business, whatever. So there's a huge amount of uncertainty right now, and we need to pay attention.
Well, and as we were talking prior to us, actually broadcasting, we talk about the different perspectives associated with uncertainty. And I would dare to say that we shouldn't sit there and just wait for things to happen. We need to be proactive in the current environment and therefore seek things that are certain. For example, the whole supply chain and fulfillment piece. Well, maybe we're not as quite certain in regards to that, especially as we're heading into the holidays. But what are we certain of, right? And I think that's going to be important in regards to us internally being able to, move things forward as well as to engage our customers.
Yeah, and I think that, it's the old, there are things you can change and things you can't change. Mm-hmm. And you need to plan for the things you can change and have things in place so that you can move in the directions that you need to when you need to. By the same token, you need to make sure that you're responsive enough so when the things you can't control happen, you're ready to move. So agility is a really important thing. Not talking about agile methodology or any of that. Excuse me. But responsive, nimble, ready to face constant change, which is going to be one of the constants of 2022 is going to be change. Everything is going to be in flux, and you need to be prepared for that.
Well, and with that, I would dare to say we have to look at learning and development in the contact center and outside of it in a very different light than we have in the past, because oftentimes there wasn't variance that was enabled or allowed when you start talking about processing and procedures. But if I'm going to be nimble, that can't happen, right? There's contingencies, there's backups, there's situations that people who are serving customers need to have available to them, to move things forward. And sometimes that's slowing things down, right? Sometimes that is.
Yes.
But I think learning and development is quite different, isn't it?
It is, and I think that's one of the areas that's changing rapidly. Organizations are becoming aware of the fact that the traditional methods of training aren't working. One of the things is that they're distributed workforces now, right? So getting everybody in a room with a trainer and going through a multi-day series of lessons isn't working. Micro training, short sessions to specific points is much more the way things are going now because of the time constraints, because of the distribution of information, and also because that's the way people learn. So that has totally changed. But again, because things are changing so rapidly, those micro learnings have to be adjusted consistently. So change again is a constant there. but you're
Well,
absolutely right on that.
Well, and I think that was also part of what we had talked about in this discussion. We were prepping for this discussion when you said, how can customer experience leaders meet the challenges in 2022? And I think the
Mhm.
whole learning and development is one of them. What else?
I think that being honest with yourself is key. What are we doing now that is working? What is not working? How are we measuring it? Are those measurements realistic? How are our customers shifting? What behaviors are they changing in response to what we're doing or what we're trying? We have to be prepared to fail quickly, right? Fail fast has been very popular for the last few years, and I think we have to continue that line of thinking. Don't be afraid to fail, but don't continue hammering on the failure that you're having, right? Change rapidly. Again, that agility, that nimbleness comes into play.
So how else?
Well, you got to be transparent. You got to set expectations clearly. Um, you know, for example, there's a business that I've worked with in the past and still do. Their lead time used to be 2 to 3 weeks. It is now 4 to 6 months. And what they've done is they're right up front with their customers to say, okay, fine, you can buy from us now. You can, but don't expect a delivery until June. And most of their customers are saying, okay, that's all right. We know there's supply chain issues and everything else. Not a big issue for us. We're planning ahead because they've made adjustments, right? Again, going back to the fact your customers are also in a position of uncertainty. So help them be as certain as they possibly can. That's super important. Make sure that their experience is consistent. If it's not the same as it was last year, you have to provide some consistency in the way that you talk to them, communicate with them, advertise to them, et cetera, et cetera. So
we talked a little bit about, the learning and development piece,
Mhm.
and you also right there talked about, being able to convey things to customers in a way
Mhm.
that's more transparent. But when you start thinking about, employee retention and employee performance, what about those two elements? What about employee retention and performance for 2022 is something that we absolutely need to prepare for and a challenge that we must overcome?
I think that the continuing shift toward measuring employee experience and considering employee experience. And just to be clear, we're not talking about employee engagement. That's one piece of it. We're not talking about having the brew pub on your office campus or having pizza on Friday. That might be part of it. But the whole experience, not once a year, check it off your to-do list, have the conversation with the employee. That's not enough. Make sure that you've got appropriate technologies that assist them and what they need to get done. There's lots of things like digital coaching out there, intelligent chatbots that take some of that repetitive workload off. So work with your employees, have a dialogue with your employees, make sure you're paying attention to what they're telling you, and work with them to make their workload more realistic, their expectations realistic, and give them the things that they need to succeed. And that includes that training that we were talking about, as well as microlearning. Make sure that they're available and appropriate for what they're trying to get done. All important.
Well, in 2022, I also start
Mhm.
thinking about potential risks and pitfalls. Like, for example, we could say, well, we're running into this, human capital hiring and retention issue. Then, therefore, we need to automate, as much as we possibly can. We need to leverage
Mhm.
AI, and we need to do, those types of things.
Mhm.
What are some of the risks if we actually take that approach and perspective?
Well, I think there are a lot of associated risks with the technology itself.
Hmm.
There's a lot of work being done on things like the ethics of AI, watching out for biases, et cetera, et cetera. But also, I think an awful lot of organizations have unrealistic expectations of those technologies. The folks in the know who are are talking about AI and their companies are producing AI enabled tools will tell you, hey, don't expect to flip a switch and have this stuff work. It takes a lot of training. It takes a lot and training in terms of training the software, the algorithms, the technology itself, as well as training the people who are going to be working alongside of it to work with it, to understand it, to have a relationship with it that makes sense. So it's not one and done. It's ongoing. Be prepared for a lot of that going forward, because that change again is constant. It's adapt, 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 adapt. It's not adapt and done. There is no plateau here. It's going to be a climb.
Well, as you're saying that, I think we're going to be in a state of iteration and learning in that particular realm for decades to come.
Absolutely true. And that's part of the idea of that agility is you iterate, succeed or fail, iterate over and over again. You improve. The saying in Spanish is poco a poco se va lejos. So little by little, you go a long way. So that's constant small steps of improvement that make a huge difference over time. And that's the way we have to think. We can't think about jumps of improvement. We have to think about steps of improvement.
Well, Roy Atkinson, thank you for giving us the insight necessary so that we have better steps for improvement for 2022. Roy Atkinson, how do CX Quick Tip listeners get in touch with you?
Bunches of ways. At Roy Atkinson on Twitter, roy@cliftonbutterfield.com is the email. And you can hit us up on the web at cliftonbutterfield.com.
And Roy's also a frequent contributor to CX Global Media and our CX Quick Tips. Roy, have a great rest of the year. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, Jim. Thank you.